right into it though. Can it hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
Yeah. We'll just set it down there. So, tell me about how you got into what you do for a living now, because I love that story.
Yeah, okay, I can tell that story pretty well. Because it was a pretty big defining life change. I was living in Seattle, working pre-press, they call it, graphic design basically, but like Mick graphic design.
Mick graphic design?
Yeah, like McDonald's.
Oh, okay.
Mick coffee or whatever. So just like slapdash small print shop pre-press work in South Seattle, commuting through Seattle, and most of the work was just I don't even want to say corporate because that makes it sound big. Commercial, just commercialism, rampant commercialism, and the print shop was in a little office park, and so the whole thing felt urban suburban commercialism bullshit. I can say bullshit, right?
Yes.
Or you can add beeps later, right?
Yeah, I'm gonna quote you.
Oh,
this is like a Rolling Stone article.
You know, I was trained as a graphic designer, and of course had all these fantasies about being a creative. You know, doing album covers for punk rock bands or neat shit.
Yeah.
And this was not neat shit. But I would spend a lot of my free time hitting the used bookstores in the university district. Get jacked up on a double latte and hang out in these musty, dark, antique-y kind of bookstores. It was really fun. And a lot of what I was looking for at the time was kind of back to the land. I mean, I don't know that I've ever wanted to be a farmer per se, but to just kind of escape those aspects of humanity that were kind of running amok with capitalism and consumerism and general cowheadedness of humanity. And I was looking at a lot of like passive solar architecture. That's kind of what was available then.
And so that's like architecture that
uses the sun's energy to heat the space.
Okay.
And that's because the books that were on bookshelves in those days were used books from the 70s, early, because this was late. I guess this was the early 90s, but 70s, 80s, that's what solar energy was.
Okay.
So, how to go have a cabin in the woods, but heat it with the sun,
right? Stuff
like that. So I was interested in that architectural element of that, and started collecting those kinds of books. And one day, walking home from the university district, I stumbled across this little office for an organization called the Center for Urban Ecology. So I stuck my head in, like, what's going on in here? And it was just this one guy, frizzy-haired guy, at the belly, and he was all about trying to reintroduce functional green to the city. Mm-hmm. Not just like plants and parking strips, but how to integrate the environment back into urban space.
Cool.
And it was cool stuff, and chatted with him, and he's like, well, what do you do? And I said, graphic design. And he said, do you have a Macintosh computer? I was like, yes. And he got down on his knees and did the pray thing to me. And so I helped him do a brochure for a workshop he was teaching, a flyer, something like that, just for free. Mm-hmm. And I might have done an illustration for that brochure too. Not a whole lot to that interaction, but he invited me to a conference at the University of Oregon called the Hopes Conference, which was put on by the School of Landscape Architecture. University of Oregon has a big architecture program, but at that time it was the landscape architects that were doing the green stuff, the eco stuff.
Right.
And the solar stuff, solar energy, and the kind of alternative lifestyle stuff. Mm-hmm. Whereas the architecture program was probably all hoping to build glass office buildings.
Right.
I don't know, I'm projecting. So anyway, this guy, just because I was willing to walk in and go, hey, what are you doing in here? I got this lead from him to then go to this conference. And the conference was cool and really inspiring. Alternative builders and solar design people, neat stuff. Green roofs and rainwater catchment and kind of appropriate technology for the modern world.
Right.
And one of the guys I met there was a guy who had opened the Real Goods store in Eugene. Real Goods had started kind of the first, I don't want to say back to the land, because they weren't selling plows, really, but kind of back to rural living, technology supply store in down near Willits, California, or some Hopland or something down there. So this was maybe their first branch store that this guy opened in Eugene. And so I was like, well, how did you get into this? How did you learn about this stuff? And he told me about a school in Colorado called Solar Energy International, which at the time was in Carbondale, but is now in, I'm going to draw a blank. Over the mountain, other side of the mountain. I'm forgetting. Anyway, they're still functional and actually better than ever. And I looked them up and looked at their course load, and it was like Solar Energy 1, Solar Energy 2, Wind Energy, nice. Small scale hydro energy, it's called microhydro when it's really small scale like that. Green building technologies, passive solar design, and I'm like, heck, I'm doing that.
Yeah.
And I quit my job at the print shop. Much to my boss's chagrin, he was like, "You're going to go burn trash for a living?" I know he was just giving me a hard time, but he didn't understand the attraction, you know.
Yeah.
And got rid of a bunch of stuff and put my mountain bike and my snowboard. This was like June. Put my mountain bike and my snowboard into my Volkswagen van. And that just shows like how long I had no idea. I had no idea how long I was going to be just out and about.
Yeah.
Winging it. Drove the van to Colorado for the summer.
And that's the same van you have out there right now?
No, that was a different van.
Okay.
That was an earlier van that was a camper. It
Okay.
had a camper in it. It was really hard, really fucking hard to pull up roots and make a jump that big. Emotionally.
Yeah.
Like, what am I doing with my life? Well, I have no idea, but I'm going to do this.
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to last 2 months, and then I have no clue. And making that kind of move was super scary for me. Just super scary. And I don't know if you've ever heard the term crabs in a bucket. Mm-hmm. It's an analogy that gets used usually when people are talking about getting out of a real bad situation, addiction or domestic violence or whatever. About the top crab could just climb right out of the bucket because he's on top of the pile, but all the other crabs are in panic mode and hold on. So even the crab on top can't get away. Mm-hmm. And I wouldn't explain my situation as that bad, but where you are in life tends to try to hold on to you,
Mm-hmm.
I don't know, it's like, it's easier just to sit there on the sofa and be unhappy than to make real change, And so it was really hard for me to make that commitment, emotionally, to make that move. But I had started with this simple step of walking into this place and saying, "Hey, what's up? What are you doing? What are you inspired by? What are you trying to make happen?" And I met an inspired and inspiring person who gave me a lead on the next step, the second step. And that second step introduced me to a person who gave me a lead on that third step. And so I spent the summer in Colorado and learned just great stuff. Totally great. Super interesting, super inspiring. Everybody I met, even on the way to Colorado, when I would explain what I was doing, was super supportive and encouraging, and it was almost like once I got out of the bucket, everybody else wanted to help this little crab get back to the ocean. Mm-hmm. Like it was really strange, like how as soon as I had actually made a move, how then stuff started just falling into place, like the universe wanted me to continue. So I spent the summer there at Solar Energy International and learned all this techie stuff. And one day in the wind power class, I asked the instructor, who's a visiting instructor from Wisconsin named Mick Sagrillo, a pioneer in the small wind industry. I said, "Mick, how do I work in this industry?" He said, "I don't need to make a bunch of money, but if I flip burgers for 6 months, I'm going to forget everything that I've packed in the past few weeks." I said, "I don't care really what I do. I just want to work in this industry." And he said, "Well, what do you do now? I mean, what's your skill set? Where are you coming from?" And I said, "Well, it doesn't really relate. I'm a graphic designer." And he said, "You should call Home Power Magazine." And I was like, "Oh, wow." I mean, I'd heard of them and I had seen a couple in the classroom, but I was like, "Oh, okay. So they're these guys doing a magazine about solar energy." And I called them on the phone and set up an interview. It was one of those magical days. We were putting a wind turbine on the roof of the school and adventuring, and I got a job interview, and it was all so great. And then I tried to jump the drainage ditch on my mountain bike and crashed into a tree and knocked myself out and broke my arm, my collarbone.
That was that same day, huh?
Yeah.
Wow.
Same day. So kind of set me back a few weeks because I couldn't drive the van back to Oregon for this job.
Oh, man.
But eventually made it to Oregon. And the ironic thing then is that the founders of this magazine, Home Power, are out in the sticks near Soda Mountain in the Siskiyou, what's it called? The Siskiyou Monument Protected Zone, and they've been living out there for 30 years or more, and publishing this magazine out in the sticks.
Wow.
Outside of Ashland. Well, I had driven through Ashland on my way to Colorado, and saw Macbeth in the rain, and went on a mountain bike ride and had some microbrews at Caldera, and I was like, damn, I could live in this town. And 2 months later, the universe is sending me to a job interview in this town.
That's crazy.
Yeah, totally crazy.
2 months later, wow.
Yeah. And so I drove the van up in the woods and met these crazy hippies, and they had Macintosh computers. They didn't have a bathroom or a shower or a laundry, but they were they had electricity from solar panels, solar electric panels, and they were publishing a magazine trying to change the world.
Yeah.
From out in the woods. And it was like, okay, You know,
Yeah.
I'll do this
Yeah.
here, you know, for a while. And that was 1995, and so it's been a while.
Yeah, you've been doing it.
I've been doing it a while. But the real interesting lesson for me from that was that, well, two things. First of all, you make that step, you start those inquiries. You don't really have to know where you're going because you're going to meet somebody who's going to help clarify the next step. Once you're moving, that momentum starts to carry you. And it's not just intellectual momentum, physical momentum. It's emotional momentum. And so things just started to feel more and more right in life once I was moving forwards, chasing something that mattered to me, even though I didn't specifically know what it was that mattered when I started the motion. And then the second thing I learned from that whole process was that there's work that needs to be done, good work for good reasons, to make the world the kind of place we want it to be. Whoever we are, whatever we want, whatever we think is right and good. I'll let people define that on their own. But whatever you think that is, there's work that needs to be done to make that happen. And there's a place for your skill set within that work. So to use the ditch digger analogy, if all you are is a ditch digger, there's good ditches that need to be dug. There's irrigation systems in developing countries. There's footings for sustainable structures for people who need homes. There's good ditches that need to be dug. If ditch digging is your skill set. So it almost doesn't matter what you're good at if you're willing to apply yourself to something you care about.
Right.
And if you apply yourself to something you care about, first of all, caring about it makes it easier to do the work, to dig.
Yeah.
Once you're willing to do the work, you'll get good at it.
Yeah.
Once you get good at it, somebody will pay you for it.
Yep.
And the next thing you know, you've spent your life making the world a better place, doing something you like.
Yeah.
So there's a long answer.
Yeah. No, that's brilliant. Now that actually leads me to say, I'm gonna wipe up my beer here.
Okay.
I have another question that I hadn't written down.
Here, I have a paper towel. I'm glad you spilled beer, because that's the kind of interview it should be. Here, I got it.
Oh, you got it? Oh, okay.
It's better than TV.
Well, I might do it again.
Well, yeah, okay, we'll keep these right here. Yeah, I know that was a long diatribe, but I've told that story before, and so it's a good story. I mean, it's worked for me.
Well, and part of the reason I kind of thought of you first when I said to interview an interesting or a newsworthy person, and I don't, it's Ashland. Like, I don't think very many people are like breaking the news, but like, you're interesting to me because you're somebody who I admire, kind of like, when I grow up, I want to be, because it's like, well, because you strike me as someone who has a kind of a beautiful like work-life balance and kind of lives as they believe, if that makes sense. They kind of live what they walk their talk. Let me put it that way. They walk their talk.
I try to.
So then my question for you is, do you feel like do you feel like you're successful in the way that you define success?
Wow, that's interesting. The philosopher in me, of course, wants to say, yeah, I got it all figured out. But
Should I leave?
no. My life will be a success as soon as we tie the knot in 6 months. My sweetie over there. No, it's a tricky one. I mean, we're so programmed in so many ways about what success means, especially growing up in America, I think. You know, and the story I just told about trying to kind of escape the system. Ended up buying into something good rather than just checking out of something bad. And I liked that. And that was happening to me at right around 30 years old. Classic Saturn return. You're into astrology, which I guess I can use those terms if this is all happening in Ashland here.
Everybody will understand.
Everybody will understand. So it was a really good outcome from Saturn return for me. But I'm still was raised male in America. I still want an awesome car. There's people out there more noble about their lifestyle choices than I am, who are like, whatever, tofu and kale and it's all I need, and whereas I like French fries and a good imported beer or microbrew anyway. And so but that kind of wanting can escalate, or at least there's always one more carrot,
Mm-hmm.
And so like, what is success? I mean, I have a home that's warm, and there's food in the fridge, and I have a beautiful, beautiful fiance that I've tricked. So yeah, the answer should be yes. But what's the human condition of wanting versus appreciation? That continuum. When do we slow down enough to realize we've got it good? Or even when it doesn't feel so good, that we've got it way better than a lot of people on the planet. And I've actually asked myself, is that the right? Maybe I have asked myself a question similar to this. And you know what? I've gotten almost everything I've wanted, that I've said I've wanted. And when I was in my 20s, I was like, I want a van, man. I want a van. It's the freedom of, like, not just a car, but, like, you could camp in it, Well, then I want a 4-wheel drive van so I can go in the mountains and camp in it, And even though I still thought I was some sort of Taoist recluse poet at the time, I needed a van to be a Taoist recluse poet in the 20th century in America. My rolling cabin in the woods or whatever. I got a van, I got my snowboard. I'm on my second awesome mountain bike. I've had an awesome girlfriend or two, and I'm about to have an awesome wife. But I still struggle with, like, the same old, like, everyday. Well, that same old everyday logistics that any human, or most humans, struggle with, of, like, will I be able to feed myself in the future, next week, next month? Will my job be around? But also just the same like struggles of that humans have of like what does it mean and why.
So I actually have a question that I was going to ask at the end of this, but I think now is the best time.
Okay.
Do you feel like you have even the slightest handle on the meaning of life?
Really?
And I mean that
4-question interview, and one of those questions is what is the meaning of life?
No, okay. What does it mean to you? What does it mean to you?
Yeah. Okay, I'm just gonna spin off now.
Go for
Here
it.
on this. Let's see. You and I were talking about art the other day. Weren't we talking about art?
We
and
were.
the kind of art that has meaning and that you appreciate versus the kind of art you want to hang on your wall.
Yeah.
And how there's a challenge there. And sometimes a conflict, like art that you totally appreciate for how it affects the world or what it says, and but art that compared to art that actually feels good, and versus like all the way at the other end of the spectrum, which is art that is just decorative, that like matches the drapes or whatever. And so I'm not even talking about that. I hope I'm not talking about that, but I think that there's a lot of art in the world that we can intellectually justify, philosophically give credit to, or validate. And the whole discussion of is it good art? Always it flip-flops back and forth between subjective and objective, like who's to say whether it's good or not, and blah, blah, blah. And I think that there's a point where you just kind of know because it feels right. And you can have a lot of intellectual diatribe trying to pick apart whether something's valid or invalid, whether it's offensive or pure, whether it's a statement about society or whether it's just buying into the same bullshit that it thinks it's being a statement about. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think there's a point where you can actually just look at something and say, no, I can tell because of how it feels that is worthy. And I'm not going to argue that should be the same for everybody. By far not. I mean, one person's art is somebody else's porn, is somebody else's porn in a good way, or porn in a bad way, or offensive. But I think yeah, and when I say porn, it doesn't need to be sexual, and it can be violent. The violence we watch, desensitized to, and can say, "Oh, that was good art." But I think there's a point you get to when you can actually back off and just feel, yes, that's worthy. That's like how things should be, pure. And the meaning of life might be to be able to take that step back and take a breath and look at your life and feel that same level of pure. Things are as they should be. That you would if you saw a piece of art. And could say, there's a lot of discussion about this, there's a lot of argument about this, but I can look at that with my heart and say, that's good. So when you can also do that with your life, just know it. Then you're succeeding, like the success question. And like I said, that's different for everybody. It's different for me on different days. You and me kicking down the sidewalk, and a 67 white Cadillac Sedan DeVille lowered slides by, and I'm going to tell you that's the most beautiful fucking piece of art ever. Totally, like, look at that sled, man. That's art. And you catch me on I'm trying to save the world from fossil fuels day, and I will tell you that same car's the devil. You know, and what am I right? But if we step back from our lives and really let things settle into what's good or right, we know it. I think we really do know it. If we let the chatter of media and the chatter of other people's expectations of who we are and what we should be, and then our own expectations just like dissolve for a second, I think it's really easy for human beings to know what's actually right. And I think if we did that more with each other, we'd realize that we actually do have a lot in common. And we wouldn't bicker about the Cadillac so much, because we'd find the real commonalities that do bond us. And the meaning of life might get more clear for everybody. So I think finding that place where you're like, yeah, I know this is right. And it won't always be right. There's bad shit happening in the world. But to find that in the self, in the family, in the people around us, and how we treat the rest of the beings on the planet, if we held it up to that judgment's a crappy word. Held it up to that light of truth. I think it's actually pretty easy to see. Is that a good answer?
That's a great answer, dude. I'm so glad I interviewed you.
I'm good at talking.
You are really good at talking, yeah. No, that's great. That's awesome. Man, this is going a completely different way than I thought it was going to go, just based on what I originally wrote down. Good. And I love it. I love it. It's so much better.
Well, we'll see how it transmogrifies, to use a Hobbes term, as we get further down these beers.
Yes, indeed. Oh, man, let me think here. Let me think. Oh,
I'm sorry that's so many words.
No,
You're gonna have
it's
an editing
okay.
job on your tablet, whatever it is.
There's really no limit on how long this is. He just said 5 questions, so okay. I might very well just transcribe everything you said and trim some
you have to
hums and haws out of it. Yeah, I do have to. I have to take it off.
You can't just push play.
There's my report.
Yeah.
No. It's great. I wanna see. This is so like you said that when you set out to Colorado, you didn't quite know why or what you were doing.
No.
You just know that you knew that there was something you needed. There was something you could find.
Well, yeah, I mean, like I said, when I was looking at those books, those were used books.
Uh-huh.
Most of it was about passive solar architecture. There were some wacky ideas going around
Yeah.
in the 70s and early 80s about what passive solar architecture meant. Mm-hmm. And people were doing dumb shit. Like putting a pond on your roof to collect thermal energy. Because water's dense, it stores heat pretty well.
Yeah. Then you have a pond on your roof.
You have a pond on your roof. You have to build a roof pond. You Google it. You'll find books on it. But you have to build a structure that can support a pond on the roof. And then if anything fails, you have a pond
coming
on
into
your
your
roof.
house.
Yeah, I mean, it's just like, come on, you guys. There's better ideas than that. And passive solar architecture actually got simpler and simpler over time. They were like, we don't need all this complicatedness. But I wasn't paying any attention to photovoltaics, solar electricity at the time. Mm-hmm. That was like a NASA thing. I was like, I'd heard of it, but like as far as I knew, it was like barely real.
Right.
You know.
Right.
That ended up being what the solar energy industry was to me. Mm-hmm. So there's a technical. Yeah, I had no clue where I was going. It was more. Well, honestly, I was trying to figure out a way to escape society, like I said. And, like, check out. I wanted to go live in the woods and get away from everybody. I wasn't necessarily looking for a career at all. I was just pursuing something that was interesting to me. And the details of what that was made themselves known as I moved forward each step, you know, to meet someone, have a cool conversation, and then just be like, well, who else should I talk to? Like, before we shake hands and part ways, who's the next interesting person? What's the next, what are you inspired by right now? And you just chase it. You don't have to know. Yeah, you have to just be brave enough to get out of the bucket, I think, and not. Well, the other way I was talking with Sarah about this before. It's like there's lots of things about the world that I think a lot of us would like to change, and human rights, indigenous people's rights, civil rights, workers' rights, old growth forests, rainforests, cheetahs, manatees, whales, freaking everything, pipelines.
Oh yeah.
And it can be just completely freaking overwhelming, depressing and overwhelming. Especially when you're in your 20s and you're like, how do I fight the fucking man? Like, mm-hmm. I can't fight all of that. Mm-hmm. It's like this entrenched evil, and it's giant, and they have all the money and they have all the guns. Like, what do we do about that? And it can be completely overwhelming. And then once I started chasing the solar thing, I was like, I'm doing something real and meaningful that's creating positive change. And I'm not 200 feet up a redwood tree blocking logging right now. And I'm not laying across the train tracks at the entrance of the nuke plant right now. But I'm actually doing real work on one element of the kind of change I want to see.
Would you say, to bring it back to what you said about how you weren't just withdrawing from something bad, but you were contributing to something good?
Right.
Would you say that the best way to contribute to something good would be to kind of instead of paying so much attention to the bad stuff and trying to directly like butt it in the head, would you say a better way to deal with that would be to build something in a completely different direction, to build something good?
No, well, maybe. I mean, I don't think there's anything wrong with chaining yourself to logging equipment. If that's the path you're choosing to get work done, and you devote your life to that, I think that's just as awesome or valid. I think the key is that you're actually working on something specific and not just getting overwhelmed by the vastness and multitudes of possibilities. Because then you'll actually do real work. You'll have effect. And you can philosophically, emotionally, maybe even financially support people who are working on other projects that are what their thing is. But like for me, it was like I found a thing that I can actually do that's contributing to how I want the world to be. And yeah, I got to go to some protests and stuff. That was fun. But I wasn't at Standing Rock because I was still trying to put out a solar magazine when that was going down.
Yeah.
Lame excuse, dude, I didn't go because I had to work. Well, except I'm trying to do good work, right? So I think if more people were doing good work, more good work would get done, and more people would be happy about the work they're doing. And that goes back to the ditch digger thing.
Yeah.
There's work that needs to get done. And so I think it's actually pretty valid to bump heads with the system, to push back, to be angry. I'm not one who gets much done when I'm angry. I kind of want to crawl up in a ball when I'm upset. I get more done when I'm inspired. Some people get amazing things done when they're pissed. So I don't want to discredit that. But I think it's more about like finding a path for the individual that feels productive for the individual. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Totally.
Okay.
Totally. I want to ask you about something else that kind of relates to what you're talking about. It's kind of a segue into a different thing. Mm-hmm. So you did a streak for peace, and I wanted to ask you kind of just like about the whole experience. I guess my question would be, how successful, and please elaborate on the reasons why or why not, how successful was that for you as a method of inspiring peace?
Well, it was an art stunt. I don't want to say it was a media stunt because we weren't really out to get media exposure. Of course, it felt good when we got some, but it was about getting emotional reaction from people, and it was right after the beginning of the Gulf War, or actually it was maybe it was before the beginning of the Gulf War and after 9/11, and the country was still really in shock by 9/11, understandably. But it was like anger and fear and pent up revenge, and we just wanted to do something that was kind of a path shift, a change in momentum from that like huge inevitability that the Gulf War felt like it was going to be. and just kind of say there's a different way to look at all of this. I mean, Bush at the time was saying you're either with us or you're against us, and which to me sounded like there's no room for discussing options. You're either going to toe the president's line and use military force, or you're one of them. You're a terrorist too. And it was like so divisive, black and white, that there was no discussion about like, wait, what's the right way for us as a country or as a species to react to this terrible thing that's happened? Is there a better way to approach this? And so the nudity thing was kind of a shocker, but it's also kind of a universal unifier. I mean, with my little tallywhacker hanging out, I'm just like a dude. I'm a naked monkey. That's all. And like almost half the other dudes with little tallywhackers on the planet. And the other half were women monkeys, girl monkeys. We're just beings, and so all of this like separation and stuff. So it was about just like, it was supposed to be lighthearted in a really heavy time, and it was supposed to be unifying as a species in a time where we were really divided. And in some ways it was one of the first political actions after 9/11. I mean, not a lot had happened. I think because the peaceniks were scared that if they came back really strong, that the country wouldn't have been ready to hear. And that's kind of the reason we kept it playful. I mean, obviously some people are offended by tallywhackers, but but in general, it was playful. It was silly. I mean, it wasn't long after that there were lines of protesters with lines of riot cops on the other side. But when you're naked, you're so completely different than a riot cop in full gear that it's an absurd standoff. And so the absurdity of us painting peace slogans on our bodies and running naked down the street was kind of about that, like, let's lighten up a little, try to be a little bit more positive, try to see. Did it achieve anything? It might have been a little bit of an icebreaker at the time. There was minor coverage in national news, which is sort of funny and neat. I don't know if it caused change. It screwed up the nudity laws in Ashland, because once the police chief admitted it in the newspaper that we really hadn't broken any laws, then all of a sudden there was a bunch of spotlights on the fact that nudity was legal in Ashland, and so people started exercising that, because it's not really a right unless you can exercise it, really. And as soon as it was being exercised, then the people who hadn't been offended before got offended,
right?
And then the laws got changed,
right?
I still think you can have your tallywhacker out if you're not near a school or near a tourist. But which means you can run around your neighborhood like that, but you can't do it in the park or downtown.
Okay. Yeah.
But anyway, positive change. I don't know. I've done some art stunts before, and mostly they're cleaned up by the man long before much of the population ever gets to see them. But they're super inspiring to do. To go back to that anger thing, like I don't get anything accomplished when I'm upset. And so I'm not the type to burn bulldozers or, destructive protest isn't my kind of thing. But when I can get inspired to do an art action, I haven't done that many, but a few, and they're fun. It's really empowering. It's really great that way, and you just hope a few people see it on the way to work and get a giggle out of it before some poor janitor has to take the plastic chains off the Statue of Liberty.
Right.
Right. Hopefully it made his day too. But yeah, I don't know.
Yeah.
That's a tough one. But it feels good. It feels good because again it feels productive. Mm-hmm. To me, as a wannabe artist, it feels productive instead of destructive.
We could get on a whole other topic about your art.
Art,
and argue about if you're a wannabe artist or if you're actually a really good artist.
Oh,
but
thank you.
But yeah. So, I'm going to ask you a couple of things. I'm not sure they're going to end up being quoted, but just I have to write kind of a intro paragraph and then a conclusive paragraph, and I'll probably describe you and introduce people to you a little bit, so there's a little bit of context coming into that, if that's okay.
Sure.
I don't have to use your last name, so that's it, but I can. I was planning on it if that's all right with you, just because.
Yeah, I don't think I've incriminated myself in any way, have I?
No, it's just, sometimes people just are like, I don't want to deal with anything, but,
I mean, you could keep me completely anonymous just for fun. Interviewee X or something.
Yeah. But, I don't know. You're you though. You're so Ben. I think there's
I'm
like
sure
there's so
no
much
college age people are gonna have any clue as to who I am, so it doesn't matter.
Well, yeah. I think the point is to bring light to you because you're interesting. You're an interesting member of this community, and that's what this is really about. Is going to find somebody who's a contributing member, or an interesting member, or a newsworthy member of the community.
Okay.
And you're really all of those things, like you've made national headlines, like that's not small, dude. Nobody else can say that. I don't know anybody else who can say that.
All I get to say is I painted that little American flag that's on that naked butt that's in that photo with my fingers. I painted
that's great,
it.
Dude.
But not my butt.
How in 10 words will you describe yourself?
Oh. 10 words. Yeah, okay, I'm working on it.
Yeah.
I'm gonna get it.
That's okay. Take your time.
$10 words or less, or 10 words exactly?
Oh, 10 words or less is
10
fine.
words or less. Hopeless romantic trapped in a grown-up's body.
That's awesome. That's awesome. I have that on tape now, so that's going in there. I hope you know. Who is your favorite fictional character?
Ooh.
And I mean someone you love, like almost you're arguably a fanboy of this character.
Fanboy. Favorite fictional character. It's not who you think.
No, I was gonna say Peter Pan, so that's not it.
No,
okay.
it's not. He always rubbed me wrong, even as a child.
Oh, really?
Yeah, he was too arrogant which is really part of what makes him him, is that like unstoppable self-confidence that he has.
Right. No, I suppose you do put a little more thought into your. I was going to compare you to Peter Pan, and I'm like, I don't know. Ben is he looks good, but I don't know if he's as arrogant as Peter Pan.
Oh yeah, Peter Pan's whole thing was like, oh, the cleverness of me. I don't mind being clever once in a while, but yeah, he had disregard for the people around him.
Right.
And I did like how he would switch sides in the middle of a battle just so he could always fight on the losing side, Yeah. To keep things going.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But no, I'm not going to say Peter Pan. Huh. Well, that's a good question. Fictional character. Well, it sounds so adult to say Roy Batty, doesn't it?
Oh, wow.
But in terms of really appreciating the struggle for being, I don't know. Maybe that's too contemporary. It'd be way more fun to pick somebody classic.
You can pick whoever you want. I think that's a very interesting. See, here's the thing. You've painted a portrait of...
Is Roy Batty Peter Pan? Kinda.
Well, yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting. I will accept that answer then, if that's what you want to go with.
I'm sure I'm forgetting somebody that I've just always been in love with, but I might have to call you in the middle of the night. Dude, I forgot. Totally
Please do. If you remember it before Thursday,
okay.
I will change it.
Yeah, cut it in, edit it in. That's a good question. I'm actually surprised I don't have a ready answer for that. Sarah, am I missing somebody?
What's the question?
My favorite fictional character, fanboy hero. She's got nothing. It's okay. She doesn't pay attention to me.
Aww.
No.
You have some archetypes.
Yeah, archetypes. But, yeah, I don't know. That's a good question.
It's a hard question. Nobody's ever been able to answer that without thinking.
Winnie the Pooh was always too stupid for me.
I just want to get the quote about Peter Pan was too arrogant, Winnie the Pooh was too stupid. It's got to be Roy Batty.
It's got to be Roy Batty. But it took me being an adult before I realized that all the Winnie the Pooh characters are these character archetypes that are pushed too far, right? I mean, Piglet was too wimpy, and Eeyore was too mopey, and Owl was too arrogant about his own intelligence, which he didn't have either. And Tigger was too bouncy, right?
Right.
But, and that was the point of those stories, is you're supposed to realize that people are worthy, But I was always, I liked the Pooh stories when I was 5, but I was just like, God, Pooh is just not very smart, is he, Mom?
Oh, man, that's great.
But, yeah, so I don't know.
Who's your favorite, favorite, it's a weird word, but who's an inspiring real life figure for you? And I will qualify it by saying, a well-known leader of some kind.
Yeah. Gosh.
It can be, an entertainment leader, but it can be a political leader, right. Social leader, whatever.
Well, Bono, dude.
There you go.
No, I'm just kidding.
Is that your final answer?
No, no. Nothing against Bono. If I was going to answer something like that, I would have said Jim Morrison.
Mm-hmm.
But no. You know, I have to admit I'm probably not well read enough to say Gandhi or Martin Luther King Jr. or whatever, because what I know about those people is pop culture meme hearsay.
Right.
And I'm old enough that I've had a lot of that, but it's still like, it's still not real knowledge, you know. Kind of failing on these questions.
No, there's no right
These
or wrong.
favorite people questions.
No, it's just interesting to me.
Yeah.
I think we got gold. I'm gonna edit it down to if Peter Pan is too arrogant, Winnie the Pooh is too stupid, it's gotta be Roy Batty. Like I'm editing that down. That's brilliant. That's gold.
But that, I mean, I don't want to say that was just for you, but you might be the only person who really gets that well enough to.
Oh, I'll qualify. This is kind of for my intro, so you know I
Okay.
can kind of paraphrase this.
You can
and
put it in
explain
context.
that Roy Batty is,
Yeah.
Rutger Hauer from Blade Runner.
Okay, but let's see, a real influential. I don't know, dude. That's a really tough one. That's a really tough one for me. And I feel like there should be a pretty straightforward answer. And there might have been a time when saying Jim Morrison would have been accurate 25 years ago or something. But because I think Jim Morrison really saw that Cadillac archetype in his poetry. Like, he saw the whole continuum of that in society and could see all of it like a poet. But I don't know if that's sort of an outdated answer for me as I've progressed as I've gotten older.
Okay, and that's going to bring me to at least one of my closing questions, which is, how the fuck do you stay so youthful at least in your appearance? I don't know how you feel, but you look like you're not a day older than maybe on your worst day 30.
So for the record,
Yeah.
it's cunnilingus.
Done. All right, you just answered that. I'm not even gonna press you for anything else.
No, I'm gonna upset. You can't say that. Not with my name, because she was expecting it.
Oh my god.
Gosh, I don't know. I mean, I have to.
I can't use that?
No.
Oh, okay.
I think you can't use that.
Okay.
You can.
No
use,
one is reading this but my professor,
can
just
use,
so you know.
Oh, really?
Like, I mean, I'm going to use it as a portfolio piece, obviously, but for now, nobody but my
Okay.
professor.
How do you feel about that, Sarah?
It's your answer, not mine.
Sure, you can use it. Let's elaborate though, because it's about passion. I mean, I have good genes. I lucked out. My dad was I don't know that I'm necessarily a good-looking man, but I am told often that I look a lot younger than I am.
Well, we can ask
So that's
Sarah
nice.
about that, and she can supplement the interview with, yes, Ben is a good-looking man.
Yeah.
We'll get a picture of you, and then everybody can see you're a good-looking man.
But my dad had similar youthful sparkle. I don't know that he actually looked young or was necessarily that handsome, but he had youthful sparkle. And I think a lot of it is really emotional, and it's not the emotion that comes from finding a state that's not hard on you and ages you, maybe a little bit, but it comes from approaching life with the I want to gobble it all up, with the this is delicious and healthy for me, in the in the same way that like running down the dock and jumping into a cold lake is good for you, being alive is living is good for you. That kind of passion. And I'm not necessarily good at that. I'll get into days of frumpiness and just do work or whatever. But but I think that I think that the desire to like chase it is healthful. It's good for the skin.
I love it. That's it. I'm good. I think that's it.